begin, though, with the latest Morning Consult Politico tracking poll, which shows American support for impeachment hitting a new high. 46% of voters now say Congress should begin impeachment proceedings to remove President Trump. That's up 3 points since last week. 43% say they are against it. The country split here. 58% of voters say they believe Trump committed an impeachable offense. 38% say the president has proven he is unfit to serve and should be removed from office. As for the latest developments surrounding the impeachment inquiry, House Democrats plan to subpoena the White House tomorrow if they do not comply with a request for documents related to President Trump's interactions with the leader of Ukraine. The chairman of the Oversight, Intelligence, and Foreign Affairs Committee sent a letter in tandem yesterday demanding material related to Trump's July call with Ukraine's president, as well as any attempts to conceal his purported actions. Top Democrats reiterated their intent in a news conference shortly after.
We do place ourselves in a time of urgency on the threat to the Constitution, and we see the actions of this president being an assault on the Constitution.
We're not fooling around here. They just need to know that even as they try to undermine our ability to find the facts around the president's effort to coerce a foreign leader to create dirt that he can use against a political opponent, that they will be strengthening the case on obstruction.
More on Chairman Schiff and the whistleblower in just a moment. Meanwhile, Kurt Volker, the former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine who resigned last week after his name appeared in the whistleblower complaint about President Trump's dealing with Ukraine, will appear on Capitol Hill today. In a private deposition, Volker is expected to testify before congressional investigators as part of House Democrats' impeachment inquiry, where he will face questions about any role he may have played in Trump's efforts to push Ukrainian officials to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden. The State Department said Volker has confirmed that he put an advisor for Ukraine's president in contact with President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and Giuliani has said he was in frequent contact with Volker. Amid all that, President Trump lashed out yesterday against Democrats and the media a number of times yesterday. He posted a tweet containing profanity, writing, "The do-nothing Democrats should be focused on building up our country, not wasting everyone's time and energy on BS," although he wrote the word, which is what they have been doing ever since I got overwhelmingly elected in 2016, 223 to 306. Get a better candidate this time. You'll need it, wrote the president. Yesterday afternoon, President Trump got into this heated exchange with Reuters White House reporter Jeff Mason, but never answered the question.
Sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Listen, you ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked you, which was,
did you hear
what
me?
did you want
Did you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Ask him a question.
I will, but
I've given you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
No, sir, I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I asked you.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media. I saw Schiff trying to go 15, call him Shifty Schiff. We don't call him Shifty Schiff for nothing. He's a shifty, dishonest guy. He should resign from office in disgrace. And frankly, they should look at him for treason. Biden and his son are stone cold crooked, and you know it. Nancy Pelosi hands out subpoenas like, she has to approve it. She hands out subpoenas like they're cookies. You want a subpoena? Here you go, take them like they're cookies. They've been trying to impeach me from the day I got elected. I've been going through this for 3 years. Believe it or not, I watch my words very carefully. There are those that think I'm a very stable genius, okay? I watch my words very, very closely.
So, Karine, through all the smokescreen, all that noise,
yes.
There is one central question at the center of all this and at the center of this impeachment inquiry, and I will quote Jeff Mason of Reuters. Mr. President, can you just make clear right now, what did you want President Zelensky to do regarding Joe and Hunter Biden? In that long exchange where the president went off talking about money that we give, or we give too much money to Ukraine, or they're not corrupt, and Rob Portman was celebrating him. He never answered that question.
Right, because we all know the answer. He's already admitted admitted to it. It's clear as day. We saw it in the whistleblower's report. We saw it from the readout from the call. We all know this is why it's resonating with people, because it's a clear-cut case. This is why we're seeing the polling moving so quickly on this. It's only been 10 days. It's not a drip, drip, drip with the polling. It is a really steady flow. Look, what we're seeing from this president is someone who is drowning in his lies. That is exactly what's happening. And what he's doing is he can't focus on anything else. He's just focusing 100% on conspiracy theories. This is where this president is right now, because he is desperate. He knows his impeachment is coming his way. We're in an impeachment inquiry, but he knows impeachment is coming his way. Look, Bill Clinton was able to survive impeachment because he focused on the job. Donald Trump is just digging himself deeper and deeper. Every time he speaks, every time he tweets, he makes the job of Democrats much easier, and he makes it harder for Republicans.
And Sam Stein, when Jeff Mason put that question to the president, which again is sort of the nut of everything we're talking about right now, he had a tantrum. He didn't want to answer the question. He yelled at him and told him to respect the president of Finland, ask a question, told him not to be rude, anything but answer the question.
Yeah, and kudos to Jeff for standing his ground there and asking it 3 times. 3 times Trump had the opportunity to answer the question. He didn't. But to Kareen's point, we know the answer. The answer has been stated for weeks and known really for months. They were in Ukraine trying to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. And that's why this controversy is so existential. It's so simple in some ways. We understand how Trump used the machinery of government to advance a domestic political agenda, and no matter how much he wants to lash out, it's not going to change those basic facts. So yeah, it is a remarkable thing and a troubling thing, frankly, to watch the President of the United States have a tantrum like that and not be able to compartmentalize any more than he's doing right now. And I think that adds to the sort of urgency that Democrats feel on the Hill. When you talk to Democrats, there is an urgency that they feel about this that is sort of profound, because they're witnessing what Trump is doing, and they're actually worried about what he will do in this moment because he feels so caged in. But kudos to Jeff, and I think, we should expect this type of behavior even amplified going forward.
And Lanhi, we're starting to see people run for the exits, or at least cover their rear ends. We saw even last week Rudy Giuliani start to say, no, the State Department put me up to it. Yesterday there was some Washington Post reporting that said unnamed sources around the vice president said, well, wait a minute. Yes, I talked to President Zelensky of Ukraine, but I didn't know that President Trump had talked to him about some kind of a deal regarding the Bidens. I was just there to root out corruption. You see people even closest to the president in Vice President Pence covering their rear ends.
Yeah, well, this is going to be the challenge, Willie, going forward, which is as this proceeding continues, there's going to be a balance amongst whether it's people on the president's staff, people around the president, Republicans on Capitol Hill, which is the balance between continuing to defend the president, knowing that there will be political repercussions for not defending the president, and recognizing that individuals have careers, they have reputations that extend beyond this presidency. And the question is going to be fish or cut bait. And at what point do people begin to focus on the future rather than the present? And I think that's going to be the most interesting question for Republicans and for people in the administration going forward, which is how do they draw this balance? Where do they draw the line? And to what extent are they willing to continue to defend the president at all costs versus defending themselves?
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.